Welcome to the Kingdom Truth Podcast. On our podcast, we teach the good news of Jesus Christ and kingdom principles that empower all people with real-life, timeless application. Now, here's your host, Bible teacher Yolanda Tyler.
Praise the name of the Lord, everybody. Thank you all for joining us on the podcast today. We have a wonderful man of God on the podcast. His name is Chaplain Sy Alli. Chaplain Sy was born in Farrell, Pennsylvania. He was brought up in a Christian home and attended Catholic schools. His family attended Mass regularly. Chaplain Sy comes from a family of several ministers. Chaplain Sy has a degree in criminal justice and is also degreed in religious studies and chaplaincy. He has led many lives. USAF European Powerlifting Champ, actor, professional wrestler, university lecturer, and dignitary protection specialist. Sy currently resides in Carmel, California, where he is a site success manager with Elevo Learning. He is a youth coach and mentor and works with at-risk youth. He also ministers to several personal care homes in Monterey. Sy served in the Air Force on 2 military stints. One lasted 7 years and the other one lasted 4 years. He was a professional wrestler for 15 years. He suffered many concussions and trauma. After the passing of his father-in-law, and a divorce of 20 years, Sy struggled personally. He battled depression and life-threatening PTSD. He has also attempted suicide. Sy surrendered his life to the Lord in 2020 after being pulled over and getting arrested for a DWI. Chaplain Sy is a father of 3 adult kids, Tasha Nicole, Samaria Hope, and Sy Alli IV. He also has 1 granddaughter, Joey Ray Kinney. Chaplain Sy is the author of the book, Out of the Storm. His story is of interest to all as mental health has been thrust to the forefront of our society. He offers a message of hope and inspiration and encourages others to find purpose and healing even in the darkest times. Thank you so much for joining us, Sy, on today.
Thank you, Yolanda. I appreciate you having me on.
Awesome. So let's start out by you sharing, what was your life like before you got saved?
You know what, Yolanda? It was pretty normal. I mean, I grew up in a small steel town. Farrell is like north of Pittsburgh, maybe about 60 miles, and it's right on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. So it's kind of midway between Pittsburgh and Cleveland. So it was a steel industry. Farrell, PA had a lot of immigrants. As you know, back in the day when we had the steel mills and the automobile industries, immigrants would come over and they would settle in. If they were going to work in the steel mills, they settled in Pittsburgh, like Western PA, Cleveland, Buffalo, places like that. And if they were working in the automobile industry, they settled in the Detroit area. So my neighborhood was filled with immigrants from Eastern Europe, from the Middle East, you name it. People were represented in the immigrant community in Farrell, PA, working the steel mills. So it was a gritty, tough town, but everybody got along. It was amazing growing up. Across the street from me, there were the Salems. They were from Lebanon, and we had folks next door that were from Serbia. So it was really a rich community as far as culturally speaking, although it was a steel mill. So when you see pictures like in Pittsburgh, when the steel mills are going and there's so much smoke, the street lights are actually on in the middle of the day. That's how dusty and dirty. I remember my mom was just a cleaning fanatic. And she couldn't stand the fact when in the summer we had the windows open and it was dust and soot from the steel mills. I literally lived like a block away from a large steel mill, but I didn't know any different. I mean, I grew up pretty normal. I was a dreamer. I grew up wanting to be a pilot. Also wanted to be a superhero. I mean, I was a big professional wrestling fan, even when I was a kid. So I was normal, I believe. I was playing basketball in high school, and I got really upset with my coach. He didn't put me in a game that I really thought I should have been in. And I got really upset with him, and I walked off the basketball team. And that took away like any chances for me to, possibly get a basketball scholarship. So when I graduated, I decided I was going to go into the Air Force. When I took my ASVABs, which is like your knowledge test. It's almost like the, your SAT. You take this for the military. Yeah. And they determine from your scores which branches, would accept you. So my scores were pretty high. So I had my choice of just military branches, and I chose the Air Force. I wanted to be an air traffic controller, but they said I had depth perception, which I thought was nonsense because I had great vision at 18 years old. So I ended up becoming an Air Force police officer. So I left right out of high school. I think I took like 3 months off in the summer, and that was it. I went to Lackland Air Force Base in 1979, the year I graduated high school.
Oh, wow.
And then that started my military career. I had never really traveled as a kid, Yolanda. I mean, living in Western Pennsylvania, I think the furthest I traveled was Detroit and Atlantic City and maybe Myrtle Beach as a kid. So I didn't get to see a whole lot of the country. But once I got into the Air Force, that all changed. I mean, I got to travel all over the world.
Wow. And then how did that change your lifestyle as far as did you drink in the military?
Absolutely. I mean, going to Germany, I really discovered beer. I mean, and their beer over there was nothing like that we had here in the US. So I was really in hog heaven over there. And I was never, as a younger person, I wasn't a liquor drinker, but I got over there and I discovered apple schnapps. And yeah, I definitely was drinking, but I don't think that affected any of my work because I did very well in the service. I mean, I was in for 7 years and I really wanted to be a drill instructor, but they said that there were no slots available. And being a security police officer, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity for me to get bases where I wanted to go. They call it a dream sheet where you fill out where you want to go. And that's really all it was for me. It was a dream because if I picked California or Hawaii, they sent me to Minot, North Dakota. So I'm like, that's really some dream sheet. So I spent time up there. I got married, Yolanda, at a very young age. My first wife, she was like 18 and I had just turned 21. And my father pleaded with me. He said, "Sy, you're too young to get married." But I thought I was an adult, Yolanda. I'm like, "Dad, I'm an adult now." But he was really right. I mean, I should have waited, but and my first wife would admit too, we could still talk now and say, my goodness, were we young when we got married? And that produced Tasha. It was my first child. So she came when I was pretty young. My first wife was young. We were really immature. We got through. We were married for 5 years. And then I met some professional wrestlers while I was in Denver in 1986. And that kind of lit the fuse for me. I really think I can do this.
Oh, wow.
So I ended up getting out of the military. And my first wife wasn't happy about that. She was like, "You're climbing the ranks here. You can have a great career. You could be a high ranking, NCO or go to school, get your degree, become an officer. And, we have regrets. But honestly, I don't think I could change anything because you never know your life's journey and the routes you're going to take, Yolanda." So my route was very wavy. So I got out of the Air Force and became a professional wrestler. And along with that, I had some acting opportunities because there was a lot of movies being filmed in Pittsburgh back in the latter 80s and 90s. There was so many movies because Pittsburgh was able to fill in for New York or large cities because of the way the downtown looked. So I was an extra in quite a few movies. Then I modeled for a little bit. So I was pretty adventurous. I mean, I got divorced twice. So those are struggles that I wish that I can take back. But, God says, look, you are past that. There's no sense in looking back. Keep walking, keep moving forward. Yes. And I drank the whole time through that. People would tell you that I really wasn't visually an alcoholic, but I knew the amount that I drank. That was enough for me to know that, yeah, I drank a little bit too much.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. So,
Yes.
all this while you're going through these different career adventures, are
Mhm.
you attending church at all or
Oh,
anything like that?
yes. Well, when I was overseas, I never known what a chaplain was until I got into the military, because obviously chaplaincy is really big in the military. So, and there was different things. My grandfather was Muslim, so I was always interested in Islam. I don't, I never called myself, I wasn't a devout Muslim, but I really wanted to know more about it. So there was an imam that was at one of the bases where I was at in Germany, and I sat down and talked with him. But all the while, at that point, I still considered myself Catholic. I went to Catholic school, and I think I told you when we were talking before, I couldn't stand Catholic school. Those nuns were like tormenting me. I couldn't wait. I pretty much, Yolanda, I really rebelled against my mom and dad. And I purposely failed third grade at Our Lady of Fatima, the Catholic school. And my dad and mom looked at me. They're like, we know you're smarter than that. I said, I don't like it here. These nuns pull my hair. I get hit with rulers. I'm like, I can't take this. So my dad said, okay, I'm going to make a deal with you. You go back through third grade, you get all A's, and then we will move you to Pargany, which was the elementary school, which is where I wanted to be from the beginning. And I did. I breezed through, and my father was like, you played us. I'm like, no, I didn't play you. I just didn't want to be in Catholic school. So I went to public school from there on out. But we still continued to go to Our Lady of Fatima. And what's really interesting, Yolanda, is my grandfather, who was from Yemen, was Muslim, but he was okay with my grandmother becoming, to Catholicism. He was okay with that. You don't see that nowadays. I mean, most
Correct.
Muslims, you can't be of another faith, but my grandfather wanted to make sure that we got, religion in the house. And if it wasn't Islam, then it was Catholicism. So that's how I grew up. It wasn't until after my second marriage to Alicia, whose father, Reverend George, was a Presbyterian minister, that I really started going to Protestant churches. But my Aunt Elizabeth Scott was an African Methodist Episcopal preacher. So as a kid, I would go spend summers with them in Pittsburgh and spend time with them. And she would live in a parsonage or, a house from the church. And that's how I really started getting into Protestantism. It wasn't until then, but I really didn't start going to church on a regular basis until I got married to Alicia, my second marriage. And we went to Presbyterian churches wherever we lived at, whether it was in Cleveland, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. It was definitely Presbyterianism for me at that point.
Wow. So now you're attending the Presbyterian church. Your ex-wife's dad was a minister, correct?
Correct.
And now you guys are drawing closer together. I remember you saying like he was a rock to you. And then let's talk about what transpired in 2005 and then the trials that you began to face.
Well, my dad passed away. He died of cancer in 2005. And my dad and I I really considered him my best friend. He got colon cancer, but he was able to beat the colon cancer. He went into remission. And my sister and I and our family, we thought he was going to be okay. But then out of nowhere, we had gotten a call and they were like, it spread to his brain. So he had tumors in his brain and he was deemed terminal at that point. But, my faith wasn't as strong, Yolanda, as it could have been back then. I thought he was going to pull through, but, pretty much the doctor said he had 6 months to live. And it was almost 6 months to that day when I overheard the doctor tell the nurse, oh, he's turned. He's got about 6 months. I didn't realize until I heard the doctor didn't know who I was. So my dad passed in 2005. I didn't know how to grieve, Yolanda, honestly.
Wow.
I didn't know the steps for the grieving process. I just internalized everything. I didn't want to show emotion because growing up, I was always told, boys and men, we don't cry. That makes us weaker. And that was the prevailing, methodology. Sometimes I believe in some of the Black communities that men just did not show emotion. So I didn't know how to let loose. I didn't know how to properly grieve. And then 4 years, not even four, yeah, almost 4 years later, Reverend George died. And I was just, again, it hurt me when both dads died, because when my dad died, my father-in-law was there to uplift me because he knew I was hurting.
Correct.
So he was there for me. And then when he passed, I think I spiraled emotionally and mentally. I just wanted to be by myself in just some closed, dark space where I didn't have to deal with anything or anybody. But I mean, through the early stages of depression, I think my safe space was my work. It wasn't with family. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to really share my hurt. Come to find out that that's post-traumatic stress. When you have these incidents in your life and you don't respond well, or you don't know how to respond to it, that's how you get PTSD. And it's not just confined to military. It's not just confined to police officers or firemen. Anybody can get PTSD. I mean, it's a trigger. It's a series of events that kind of set a mental pathway for you to really struggle. So the things I know now, I did not know then.
Wow. And then 5 years later, your divorce comes.
Yes. Wow. I got divorced in 2014, and I just left. I left Central Ohio. We were living in the Columbus area. And while we were separated, I got this phone call to go, for a potential job in Denver. And it was the cannabis industry. And I was like, what? I didn't know that was even an industry, but someone that I had worked with years ago as a protection agent, I had looked after, got into that space. And he said, Sy, this is an industry that really needs like regulation. It really needs like a person who's well-versed in risk management. So I made that decision to take the leap and leave Ohio and go to Denver. And professionally, Yolanda, that really should have been the pinnacle of my career, because a lot of people thought I was going to fail. They thought, man, knowing all these people, all my colleagues were retired special forces, retired Secret Service, FBI, CIA, all the letter alphabets. I had colleagues that said going into that industry is going to be detrimental to you. It's going to be a career crasher. But I went anyway. And once I got to Denver, my eyes were just like saucers, because I was trying to wrap my arms around what I thought was an illegal business or illegal operation was all of a sudden legal in Colorado. And they were putting all these regulations together, and our facility was still being built. I was able to put, like a fingerprint on the security measures of the facility. And the Dixie Brands facility was like a pharmaceutical company. We had all the bells and whistles, all the security classified areas that, certain employees couldn't go into. It should have been the pinnacle of my career. There was media coverage, Yolanda. They were filming pot barons of Colorado, I think CNBC. And I was trying to duck and hide from the cameras. I didn't even want people seeing me on camera. I was trying to hide. And my fellow employees are laughing. They're like, Sy doesn't want to be on TV. After a while, I just said, you know what? Forget. I don't even care. And I was on like a handful of those episodes. So there was a lot of people looking at that industry. And I was really shunned by a lot of my colleagues. They thought that I had really just tipped over the edge.
Wow.
But then things started happening professionally, but personally, I was in harm's way. Once I got home, in front of people on the job and in the media, I represented well, and I was proud to represent. But when I got home, I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I was like, man, what are you doing? Where are we going? Where are we at? You're divorced. You're away from your son. My daughter, Sammy, at that point had already gone to Chicago to college. And I felt bad for my son. I'm like, man, I'm not with him. There was just so much torment.
Wow.
And Yolanda, I worked very hard to make sure people did not know that I was struggling. And I think that's what made it more exhausting, trying to hide that and mask it and make sure people don't even get a hint that I'm struggling. And then it got bad. I'm just like, I can't do this. I'm exhausted. It's almost like a person's in a room, Yolanda, and it's a dark room, pitch black. You can't see anything. Mm-hmm. And for a while, you're trying to reach for a light switch to turn the light on, but you're walking around and you can't find the light switch. And then there's these big holes in the floor and you're trying not to fall through. That's almost what it's like. You're trying, okay, I'm trying to find the light. The light's going to help me. I need to avoid these holes in the floor so I don't fall through. And then after a while, you just say, forget it.
Wow.
You're like, I don't want to turn the light on. I don't care if I step in a hole and fall. And that's when you're at a point where you're ready to take your life.
Wow.
And that's the way I felt. And I was racking my brain of how I could do it and who would it affect. I thought I was going to do it in a hotel room. My roommate had already told me that his former roommate jumped out a window in his place, in his condo. So I didn't want to do that to my roommate. And I wasn't even thinking. So I did it in my office, which, would have been very detrimental to the company and me becoming the first security executive in the cannabis space. But that's what I did. And
wow.
I picked Saturday.
So walk us through that, the day that you picked and how you planned everything.
I'm pretty meticulous, Yolanda. I was like, okay, I'm going to do it in my office. I'm going to do it on a Saturday because I work Saturdays. We were a production facility. We made edibles and chocolates, that are cannabis infused and that. So our chefs and all that were working on a Saturday, and I would go in and mess with them and put a chef's hat on and try to make chocolates and would mess them up. They're like, okay, no wonder you're the security director. You go over and sit in your office. We'll do this. And we would laugh and everything would be good. But once they left, I made sure the facility was secure. That was about a 40,000 square foot facility. So it was sizable. We had a lot of office space, a lot of production space, a lot of warehouse space. So we had cameras galore to make sure that we were within regulations. But I always wanted to go above and beyond whatever the state regulations were. So I had a whole big monitor and about 80 cameras in my office. That's where the safe was, where we would keep cash at. So my office, the security office, was kind of like the nerve center of the company as far as, our finances, and cannabis, even probably today, it was cash driven, Yolanda. It wasn't like you can go put funds in a bank because banks wouldn't accept it. So we had to fill cash machines, ATM machines, to make sure that our employees got paid. My general manager and I had to go to Cherry Creek Mall in Denver because that was the only Bank of America. They had no physical branches in Denver. So we had to put the money in ATM machines. And it was dangerous. You talk about risk management.
Amen.
So we were wearing like bulletproof vests to make sure we didn't get shot. So I decided I was going to do it in my office. And I picked the day. It was a Saturday. It was April 18th, 2015. I said, that's going to be the day. And I had resolve. And I said, I'm definitely going to do this. And I'm looking in my office to see how I was going to do. Once the staff left, I did my walkthroughs and made sure the facility was secure. Nobody was in there, Yolanda. I had a little bit of music on my computer going. It was like a loop. I brought this big old jug of Grey Goose vodka, and I was like, I'm going to try to drink as much as I can to dull the pain. And then I had a bit of courage and said, no, I don't need this. I don't need liquor. I didn't do drugs or anything, so that was never an issue. And I said I was going to do it. And I took my Glock 19, which I carried, that was on my hip day in and day out. I mean, this thing was like a part of my body.
Right.
And I took that out of my holster and I put a round into the chamber. I got in my chair and I looked behind me and I saw my kids' pictures were behind me. And I didn't want, blood spray or splatter to get on the pictures. So I moved the pictures and I got into the chair and I was going to put the pistol at my head. But I said, man, if my hand's shaking, I might just kind of graze myself and then I'll sit here and bleed out. So I decided I was going to put the Glock in my mouth. I put the round in the chamber. I had my finger on the trigger. And just when I thought I did the last little bit of pressure, everything went black in my office. Everything. Wow. There was no music, no cameras. I didn't hear the HVAC system, which I could hear, which was pretty loud in that facility. It was complete stillness. And I thought, whoa, I said, I did it. I didn't feel anything.
Wow.
And I can't feel my physical body. It was just unreal of what I was feeling. And I was like, okay, maybe this is part of the transition process. This is where I'm going to go, and then I'll be at like a TSA checkpoint, and I'll get checked out before I go, which, hopefully I'm going up and I'm not going down.
You felt a numbness,
yes,
right? Mm-hmm.
I couldn't feel anything. And then all of a sudden, it felt like the hair on my arms and my hair stood on end. It felt like an electrical charge. I'm like, wait a minute. I can't feel my body, but it feels like there's something electrical, some sort of pulse going through. And so confused, Yolanda. I didn't know what was going on.
Wow.
And then at that point, I felt like there was somebody in this dark space that was with me. And I'm like, man, there's somebody, I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what's going on, but there's somebody here with me. I can hear like low murmurs. And then I could smell, and I can smell like an aroma of a person. And the aroma that I smelled was so familiar that I was like, man, wait a minute. That's like my dad. There was a person on my left-hand side, like crouched down, and they were talking. And there was a person behind me with their hand on my right shoulder. And the grip, I felt like it was familiar. I'm like, wait a minute. Like my dad is in here with me. And I can hear these low voices. And I said, man, that's my father-in-law. I can feel that hand. Every time I shook his hand, he had that crazy strong grip. And I was like, what's going on? Are they here? Where am I? I couldn't figure it out. I was beside myself, Yolanda. Yeah. And then I can hear, it sounds like my father was telling me, man, this is stupid. What are you doing? And then my father-in-law was like, son, do you realize what you're going to leave behind in your wake? And before I can even answer that, this old time projector screen had dropped down like in front of me and in my view. Wow. And then this movie started going. It was like when my grandmother and grandfather would travel around the world, they'd come back home and we'd watch these homemade movies. And it was like my life I'm looking at it when I was born on Christmas Day in 1960 and up through everything, through my life, through the military, through my marriage, getting out, getting married to Alicia, everything I saw. And then when I thought it was over, I'm looking at a picture of me in my office and watching me actually shoot myself. I'm looking and I see the blood splatter back on the consoles. I see my body slump over and I'm just watching. And then what must have been a couple of days later, I guess my coworkers finally found the key to get into the office. And when they went in there, the looks on their face, wow, the hurt and the pain and the anguish of them finding my body, which had been a couple of days at that point, I'm watching this. And then I watched them tell my family, and I'm watching how my mom reacts. My mom was still alive then. She didn't pass away until 2021. My sister and my kids, the anguish. And that's, when my father said, do you realize what you're going to leave behind in your wake? Then I saw everything that happens when someone takes their life, that it's not the person that takes their life that struggles. It's the family, it's your friends, it's everybody in your circle that sees that, and then they have to deal with it. So wow, both my father and my father-in-law asked me after I saw all that, is this what you really want? And I could barely muster a word, but I said no. And as soon as I said no, Yolanda, everything starts coming back on. I can hear the HVAC again. Amen. Every one of my cameras, one by one, started illuminating. And then I can hear my computer start back and I can hear music. And I'm back in my office, but almost 5 hours had elapsed. I sat down and put that pistol to my head around 4 o'clock. 9 p.m. is when the lights came back on. So 5 hours had elapsed. Wow. And I'm looking and I'm noticing that I'm very wet, not just from sweat, but I had urinated all over myself. It's almost like I lost all of my body functions. I didn't eat that day. I just couldn't eat. So fortunately, I didn't defecate on myself, but I absolutely urinated all over myself. That was 5 hours of, I don't know how that time went by. And when I came to and I'm looking and I'm like frozen in my seat, I didn't want to move because I did not know what was going on. My analytical mind that had traveled all over the world and provided protection for all these diplomats, I couldn't figure out what had just happened. And I was terrified. It took a while for me to even leave my office to go around because I looked around because I thought somebody was playing a prank on me. I really did. I was like, this is crazy. What just happened? And that was, I walked
Wow.
away from that.
Praise
But
God. And the hand of the Lord was on you the whole time.
I
All
didn't
this was going
realize it,
on. You didn't
Yolanda.
realize it till, but it
No.
was though. Oh my God, you know?
Yes.
And that is so awesome. And then now you shared with me too that you didn't really come into the knowledge or
No.
actually surrender to the Lord until 5 years later. But the beautiful thing about it is the Lord kept you and you never went through that experience again,
No.
right? After that. So that is
Yeah,
so awesome.
absolutely. The one thing, Yolanda, that I knew is that I was never, ever going to try to take my life again. I mean, I remember those Scared Straight movies that came out and, people that look at death and then, I think that I was close to being there and I had no desire. I can see God just looking for my father and father-in-law and saying, hey, get down there. You got to handle this. You go get that boy.
Amen.
Because
Amen.
they were there.
Amen.
They were there.
Amen. They
And
were there in that room in the
but I
spirit.
couldn't figure it
Wow.
out. I could
Right,
not
right,
figure out what
right.
had happened. So, Yolanda, what
Wow.
I wanted to do, I said, I'm going to just try to store that deep somewhere in my soul and never, ever have to talk about it. Because if I did, nobody would, understand. Maybe they wouldn't believe. And so I was just going to hide it. And I hid it for 5 years. I continued to drink. I moved to the Pacific Northwest after I left Denver. And I was up there for almost 4 or 5 years. And then 5 years later, I get
Praise
arrested.
God.
I
Yes.
was drinking. We were celebrating. Our company was almost getting to be awarded a big contract for our security firm that I worked for up in Puyallup, Washington, just outside of Tacoma. I told my friends after she bailed me out, I said, I'm never drinking again. And I know she wanted to laugh, Yolanda,
Right.
but I stopped. I picked up my mom's
Amen.
King James version and I started reading and kept reading. And then about a week later, God made his appearance to verify that, yeah, that indeed was his work that happened 5 years ago. And he had a charge for me. His charge was, you need to write. You need to write about this. I'm like, but God, I'm going to be exposing myself as vulnerable and showing my transgressions. And then he was like, that's the point. You need to write because you're going to be able to help people with your writing and your story and your journey. And then I started taking seminary courses and I zeroed in on chaplaincy. And I don't know why. I don't know whether God was telling me to look at chaplaincy because it's such a variation of people that you deal with. And then I got my degree in chaplaincy and started working up there in a cancer treatment facility. Then I ended up getting down to California and became homeless. So even as a chaplain, I got to California and things didn't work out with a security company that brought me out here. And I was in a homeless shelter for almost a year. A friend of mine who was in the homeless shelter gave me his card to go to a job interview with a level of learning. And I got the job. I became a coach and I got promoted to site success manager. So I have about
Amen.
40 schools throughout Monterey County and the adjoining counties. So things
Amen.
worked out.
Amen. Things worked out and just God's grace, his love, his mercy.
Yes.
It's so beautiful, Sy, in your life, how God's hand has been upon you the whole time. And he's given you, like I said, a heart to help people find their way through difficult, tough times. So, what I'd like you to do now, let's say there are some listeners and they're struggling with depression or PTSD or just struggling with suicidal thoughts and they're being tormented. And what I'd like you to do is to please go ahead and encourage our listeners.
I think it takes some understanding of people. It's very easy for people to say, oh, I wish I knew you were struggling. I would have been able to maybe help you. But people don't understand that when you're struggling like that, you don't want to be helped. You just want to be left alone and you want to just go curl up in a corner and just be by yourself. So I encourage your listeners or anybody who's out there is to open up about it. Don't be closed-minded about it, and understand, just like my father-in-law told me, do you understand what you're going to leave behind in your wake, meaning all the people that are in your life and how it's going to affect them when you take your own life. It's almost selfishness. I hate to say that because I would never want to hammer somebody that's down, but you're thinking just about you. You're not thinking about your loved ones and people that truly care about you. So you have to be able to open up. You have to be able to, at least if you can't articulate it, then write down some notes and write down which tomorrow I want to do better. I want to be better. So I'm going to try. I'm going to find something that's in my wheelhouse, a craft, something that can occupy your mind so that you can put forth an effort to try to get out of that. It's not easy. But the thing is to be communicative about it. If I had to do over, I would have definitely found some help, but I was so closed in. So I would advise, just seek help, open up, talk about it, write about it, do whatever you need to do. But be mindful of others around you, because you can take your life, you can shoot yourself, you can hang yourself, you can take a bunch of pills and do whatever it is you need to do. But it's going to affect everybody that's around you, and you need to be mindful of that. So I'm hoping that your listeners, if you know somebody that's struggling, be able to articulate that to them, try to coax them out, and at least talk to them, and hopefully they'll open up to you.
Amen. Now, would you please just go ahead and close out in prayer? That is awesome.
Absolutely. Gracious God, as we come to the end of this time together, we pause to thank you for the breath in our bodies, the hope in our hearts, and the quiet ways you've been speaking to us today. Thank you for every listener, wherever they are and whatever they're carrying. Let your presence settle around them like a gentle covering, steadying, comforting, and reminding them that you are never alone. As we step back into the rhythm of our lives, guide our thoughts, our words, and our actions. Help us release what we cannot control, embrace what is ours to do, and trust you, Father, with the rest. So strengthen us to love well, to walk with integrity, and show compassion in the world that desperately needs it. May your peace guard our minds. May your joy lift our spirits. May your wisdom direct our steps. And may your grace meet us again and again in the days ahead. Keep us until we gather again. In your precious, mighty name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sy, for joining us on the podcast today. God bless
for having me.
you.
God bless you as well, Yolanda.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Kingdom Truth Podcast with Bible teacher Yolanda Tyler. Please subscribe to our podcast so you will know when the next episode is published. To hear more biblical teachings and give to support the ministry, please visit our website at www.thekingdomtruth.org. That is www.thekingdomtruth.org. God bless you until we meet again.